Hey guys, we're gonna get started here in a couple minutes. Let's wait another minute or two to get everyone get in here. See a bunch of people joining. We got Zhao, Abdul, Mark. Welcome everyone. Got people from all over Norway, Victoria, Canada. That's awesome. Today we're gonna get into one of my favorite new features. I think this is one of the features I'm going to be using constantly called Derive. It's very similar to inserting external references from other designs and other things like that, but it's a little bit different. And I'll show you some of my favorite use cases for it and how to use it. But before we get there, Aaron promised it last week. We're going to have a little raffle. Make sure to comment this week on this live stream after it's posted to be entered into the raffle. But Aaron had a great 360 Live last week on what's new with the generative design capabilities in Fusion 360. Hopefully a bunch of you had some time to try it out. But we're going to go through a little random test to see what you're going to win. We got a couple of giveaways like a Fusion 360 water bottle, some stickers. I think there's some socks in there. But for this week, let's go ahead and see who the random winner is going to be. And here we go. Oh, Naresh Swarma. So we're gonna comment. We'll get your information and send you a little gift bag. We'll see if you guys can win next week. Make sure to comment and make sure to subscribe as well to this YouTube channel if you want to get notifications. But let's get into one of my favorite topics today, Derive. So I'm gonna switch it over to Fusion. All right. So one of my favorite topics today is it's brand new. It's some of you probably have been testing it over the past week or so. It came out last Tuesday. There's a new tool called Derive, and I saw a couple comments that people already found them. You could see under the Create dialog box, we have a new Derive feature, as well as under the Insert dialog box, we have a Derive feature as well. And I'm going to start explaining how this is different than other tools like inserting from an XREF. So up into this point, let's say I wanted to do a little analysis and see a little section view of this guy, and I want to insert a plug in here. And this plug is like a standard components that we buy, and we're not going to edit any geometry after the fact. So typically up into this point, you've probably been coming up, right-click, insert into current design. And what it's going to do is go grab that design and place it right in here. It's cut in half because of this section analysis, but I'll say I want to place that in there. And then right now it's floating in space, as you can see. So I can just go ahead and add one joint to quickly put it into its place. But what this does, and what I can't do with this file that I can't do with Derive, which I'll show here in a second, let's place that up there. And so I'm able to do very similar things like this in Derive. Let's just turn off this analysis so we can see it again. And I'm gonna isolate this. So if you ever have an assembly and you want to just focus in on what we're looking at, we can actually just right-click and say isolate. And now we just see that inserted component that I just brought in. So you'll notice that if I try to, like, let's say I hit my delete key and delete that fillet, nothing really happens. Let's say I create a sketch real quickly and do a circle and extrude this and try to cut it. I can't make any changes to that geometry. This is one thing that Fusion can't do today, is this thing called in context edit, but we're going to be adding that capability in the future. But today we can't really edit in context or inserted components in that workflow. So this is where Derive comes into play. So let me go ahead and unisolate this and show the rest of the assembly once again. So you'll see that in time what we just did so far is I inserted that component and then I created that joint to it and assembled it. I can't really add any features past it. If I wanted to make a change to that inserted plug assembly, I would have to open it up, make some changes, and then come back and consume those changes by getting an update. But now we have a couple different workflows called Derive. So in this case, we have two ones called Create and Insert. And I'm going to explain the differences of these in here as through this demonstration, a couple different scenarios. So if I want to go grab something from an other Fusion 360 design, I can simply say I want to insert Derive, it's going to open up my select source dialog where I can go through and pick what kind of components I could look through any of my Fusion 360 designs. I'll say I want to grab my stop valve. And you'll see what it does is it actually is going to open up that document in this insert derive mode. So you'll see it opened up this document, and I can actually select several different things throughout this component. And you could see that I actually grabbed the wrong one. So let me go back. Sorry about that. That one was cut in half to show a section view. But let's say I want to insert derive again and grab the right one this time. Sorry, that's the one I wanted. It's just going to ask me to save it real quick. But now when I go into the derive option, it's going to ask me a couple different things. Let me do that one more time because it wasn't saved. I had it opened preparing for this demonstration. Sorry about that. So now it's going to ask me, what do I want to grab? So you see this dialog over here is basically what I'm going to pull in. Typically, when we use the insert component from the data panel, you grabbed everything in that Fusion 360 design. So if I were to do this with this design, all this valve would come in, this top piece would come in, everything would come in, and maybe I just want this handle right here. So I can select that handle, and you'll notice that it actually clicked the body. So if you click in the graphics area, it actually goes down and selects the body of that. In this case, I actually want the component, so let's just select the component out of the tree, and you'll notice it grabbed that component of the wheel assembly. But what we can grab are bodies, components. You can even grab sketches if you needed to make references. You could buy sheet metal parts, sheet metal flat patterns. I'm going to demonstrate that in a minute. You can also grab things like parameters and construction geometry and reference those in. And I'll explain a couple use cases of that in the end. But what I'm going to do is grab just this wheel component, hit OK, and you'll notice it only brings in that wheel component into this assembly. If I find it, up there it is. So this one wheel component came in, it added a feature in the timeline saying I just pulled it right in. We can quickly add a joint to this. Let's say I want to grab this face and grab that. You'll put it into place. But you'll notice the last time when I was trying to make changes to this, it wasn't allowing me to. So in this case, this hole's a little bit too big. So I can just grab these. Oops. And hopefully my delete key works. And delete it, and it sucks it right up. And you'll notice it added a feature in time. So now I could come back, create a sketch. And let's say I wanted this hole to be roughly the same size as this hole right here, so I could project that in. You'll see that came in as a sketch now. And now we can extrude this down. And you'll see that I can extrude it as far as I need to. We'll say I want it to come down. I'm going to say I want the distance to be to object. Select this face and grab it all the way down. And just to ensure it's cutting what I need to, we can go to the Objects to Cut field and see that it's only cutting my one body wheel. And we made that quick change to it. So I'm adding features that I would not have had the capability to do if we use the insert design workflow as of right here. So the two main purposes that really are going to help with this is A, it inserts it with a reference and you can make changes to your design. And B, it also lets you select just a piece out of that Fusion 360 design rather than the entire thing. So those are the two big changes. And really where that can really help you is for things like component reuse. Rather than me sitting and redesigning this entire wheel, I can go and grab something that's maybe gets me 80% of the way there and then make those 20% changes. And if this wheel ever updates, it will also propagate to this design. So let's say if I open up that stop valve that we grabbed it from, and let's say I just made this guy bigger. Let's just say I want to make this wheel a little bit larger. We'll make it obnoxious so you guys can see the changes. And I'll go ahead and save this design. We'll say increased wheel size. And I'll give you a bonus point if you actually know where that description comes in. It comes in the data panel. Over here, it will tell you where those descriptions. So I just typed the increased wheel size. It puts it right under that for the versioning down here. If you click on the version number, there's a little bonus tip for you guys today. But once I go back to the valve assembly, you'll see that it's flagging me out of date. Even in the timeline, it's showing me that that component's out of date. That Derive reference. So I can actually come, just say I want to get latest, and it'll come and grab that design. Whoop. Awesome. So the next cool thing with this Derive feature is, I mean, I'm probably one of the worst people. I always make mistakes. I come through, I already grabbed that wheel assembly, but my boss was like, oh, we need also another component out of that assembly we grabbed with the original wheel. So what we can also do is always make changes. So you can go through in time, grab the derived feature, and say edit. And what it's going to do is open it right back up to when we were designing it. Let's say I needed that nut, for example. We can go ahead and grab the body. So watch out, the single click in the graphics area grabs the body, but you can also grab the nut out of the component out of the tree, and that will just grab everything under it as well. In this case, it's just a body, so that selection wouldn't have made much of a difference. But we can go ahead and hit OK, and you'll notice now that the nut comes through. My joints aren't going to be that great, but we can actually just grab that, place it on there. Let's flip it. And we now have those two reference components in there. So we can always make changes to this design. So that's just one use case of it, and I think that's going to be most powerful. I've found so many use cases for this so far. My favorites right now are finding other components that I've already designed and bring them in for component reuse. That's really just making it my design process faster. But this is also, the next one is probably one of the more important ones, my important use cases so far. So let's say I wanted to come in here and I just wanted to machine. I had a couple components in here I wanted to machine. And this is going to be really powerful for your CAM users. Typically, what I had to do is kind of jump into the CAM environment, which is now the manufacturer environment if you've turned it on in your preferences for a tech preview. But if you actually come in here and go to the manufacturer environment, maybe I wanted to machine this component and finish machining this after it was forged. You would have to have multiple setups. It gets like a hiding showing game. It's kind of complicated. So instead of doing that, what I've done is I've already created a design in my Workholding folder. So this is just, what it is just a vise so far. So I would lay out a couple of vices if you needed to. You could do this workflow in a couple different ways. But let's say I have this guy over here. It's already open. But in this case, the last time I did the insert workflow because I had it open and I went and grabbed it. This case, I want to say, I want to create a derived asset. So I want to push this component, this lid to be machined, into that assembly. So I can actually say I want to create a derive. It's going to ask me to save it, of course, the saving game. Made some changes. I don't remember what I did. I also spelled that incorrectly. But now it's going to pop open a similar looking dialog, but it's going to have a couple more options, and I'm going to try to explain these as we go through. So the first options that's probably of importance, create new design and add to existing design. Since it's already living over here, I don't need to create new. I just need to come in here and say add to existing. And then I can go ahead and select that lid machine to be placed. And I can hit OK. And it's going to grab that, ask me where do I want to throw it, and it's going to throw it right in that top housing to be cammed. That's what I named it. And what you'll see is now it's just going to throw it into it. So really the two workflows, in my opinion, where I found that they're useful, if I have the existing design open and I want to go grab something, I would use the insert workflow. So if I had this open and I was like, oh, it's time to machine it, I'd go grab it. But if I have this open and I already know where I want to throw it, then I use the create and then add to existing workflow. And then we can go ahead and position this if we needed to. And let's throw that guy up here. Good enough. Hit OK. And then if we come in here and go to the manufacturer workspace, and let's say we need to drill out these holes or something on our 3-axis machine. When I create that setup now, you'll notice that now I could say I want the model to just be this component, and you can actually position it so let's say my stock is, we had a fixed size box and the width on the Z is, I don't know, 200, or let's go a little smaller than that, 175. Cool. And hit OK. Before I hit OK, the main purpose of this is really you can model up your fixturing if you needed to, and you can actually turn on the fixture checkbox and make sure that you don't have any collisions with your fixturing. So in this case, I'm using an orange vise, and we can select this. I could select more components too, but in this case, I'm only worried about my toolpaths hitting the jaws here. And we can go ahead and hit OK. And now when I, oops, sorry, I'll select a machine. Let me get my, let's just grab like a Haas with the axis and hit OK. And so now when it's machining or going through the code, it'll ensure that we don't have any collisions with this, and it'll flag us if we do have a collision with our vise. So just another tip, we have a lot of work holding already in Fusion 360. If you go down and go back and scroll all the way down, there is a CAM samples folder down here. It's got some awesome stuff. The CAM team has been doing some great stuff, putting in other examples as well if you want to go look at some toolpaths that already been created and kind of reverse engineer. But in this folder, they have a work holding where you can grab some Raptor work holding, orange vise, 5th axis. I always think that says my name, Bryce tool, but it's not, unfortunately. But you can go ahead and use that and use this derived workflow to get in your work holding and do that workflow. So let's jump back in real quick. So that was just one of my most favorite workflows so far as well. I see a huge benefit for all CAM people to, especially if you have a Fusion 360 design that's designed top down with a bunch of different machine components in it. You can now pump stuff out. And especially sometimes your designer and your machinist are different. So your designer could keep working on this huge Fusion 360 assembly while your machinist just pulls out a part that's ready to be machined or prototyped. Start designing that with right there. And it'll keep being referenced, so if the designer adds another new hole, it automatically propagates to the CAM toolpaths. So this next one's pretty cool. We added some new capabilities in our sheet metal workspace quite a while ago. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of that. So I have a component here to be machined. So I have this, I have this sheet metal flat pattern to be cut on a water jet. And what I want to do is I want to put on more components. We just got a call from our boss, and we need to we need to add a couple to this job that gets cut out on our water jet. So I can come through, jump back into the design workspace. Before I do, you'll see that I already have this set up. So there's a 2D profile. It's cutting this out based off of my setup. So let's go back and go into my design workspace. And again, in this case, I can either create or insert if I want to go grab something from another component or a different Fusion 360 design. Let's do that. We'll say I want to insert derive. And it'll ask me, what do you want to derive? And it is way up here. Sorry, give me a couple minutes to find it. As you can see, I have about 1 billion projects. And I don't know what it's called, so I'm going to do it the reverse. I have it open. It's in this sheet metal case. Let me do the create derive workflow and find it. There we go. So in this case, we're going to say I want to add to existing again. But the key here, when you're selecting your sheet metal components for sheet metal layout to cut on your water jet, you have to select the flat pattern. If you select the folded component, it will bring in the folded component. So make sure you select the flat pattern within these components. And then we'll hit OK and browse for the right one. And of course, I have to go find it again. Do that somewhere in here. There it is. Select. And what you'll notice is this design now had, what I took for this layout is different Fusion 360 designs. I took different flat patterns from those designs. And now what we can do is say I want to move, let's say I want to move that guy over here. Hit OK. Let's click that guy, move him over here. And hit OK. And we can start to lay out. Maybe I need a couple of these, so I say copy and paste. I'm going to say I want to capture my position. And you see now I'm quickly laying out this. Let's paste another one just for demonstration purposes. Hit OK. So now I just quickly laid out. We need to quickly prototype 3 of these sheet metal cases and put them all with this one job. Now when I jump back into the manufacturer workspace, the cool thing is with this integrated CAD CAM platform, I have a sheet metal tool right there. I already laid it out. It's said to say select all the same faces. So all I have to do is right click. Oops, don't do that. Right click and say generate toolpath again. It takes a couple seconds, but you'll see what it does. It will go through and generate the toolpath for the water jet to cut all of these in one go. So I quickly added these jobs to the same job that I already had done. And both of these are coming from different Fusion 360 designs. So if someone was working on this casing, made some changes, I would get a flag. All I would need to update, regenerate my toolpaths again, and we can quickly send that out, send the G-code out to the shop floor to start cutting on our water jet again. So those were 2 of the workflows that I think I showed you from the beginning, where I started with some designing workflows to make designing easier and a component reuse, where I see huge for this new Derive tool. Then I got into some of the manufacturing workflows where you can put it into a vise, take one part out of a huge complex assembly and put it into a vise. And then also with the sheet metal, I took different Fusion 360 designs from different Fusion 360 projects and put them into one so I can lay them out quickly. This last one's a little bit more advanced, so don't get too scared here, but this one is for, I would say, your expert CAD users or the Yodas out there. So what I've done so far is I've created a parameter file. It's blank. You could check it so far. It's nothing too exciting so in this example. But if you go to the modify, change parameters, I've added a couple parameters, and I'll go ahead and add another one. I'm going to call this hole diameter. And I'm going to say I want it to be millimeters, and let's say I want it to be 18. Hit OK. So there's a couple tricks here, and the first trick I recommend is using your favorites. And up until this point, I didn't even use favorites until today. We have given feedback already on this tool, but first make sure you check this favorites, and I'll add it to the favorites dialog. And then hit OK. Then when I say I want to go create a Derive, I'm going to have to save it because I just added another parameter to it. Let's say added hole parameter. Hit OK. And I'm going to say I want to add to existing. And down here, all the way at the bottom, there's a parameters checkbox. So watch out for that one. So there's 2 options, the favorites and from components. So from components will grab different parameters, but to ensure that you get your parameter to go into the Derived feature, make sure you check this favorites checkbox. It's been my the best one for me, at least, to make sure I'm doing something correctly. But I can now say I want to hit OK. And I'm going to put that into the stop valve. Let's hit select. And you see that it just opens the one we had earlier. If I scroll all the way to the end of the timeline, I get a new create for or derive just for that parameter. So all I'm doing is deriving the parameters. So if I go back and edit this sketch, let's find it. You'll see I don't have a diameter for this hole yet. So if you actually look, I can now dimension this. And I'm going to start typing hole diameter. And you'll notice there's, you're like, where is it? So this is one of the caveats that you have to get used to. We've already given feedback and we're making some changes to it. It's a brand new tool. But it doesn't, nothing comes out of it. So let's say, let's just say 20 for now, so I can go and explain it. I'll even delete it. So once I exit the sketch, what's happening is when I go into my modify dropdown, it brings over those parameters, but this gets me quite often. You'll see that it brought over the parameters from that file that I named parameter v4, but it's a user parameter right now. It's not a model parameter. And for autocomplete to work, it has to be a favorite. So if I now say this hole diameter ref, it will throw it in an autocomplete. Otherwise, I would have to make sure, if you don't want to use the favorites workflow, that I spell capitalization matters, but this entire thing, hole diameter dash ref. If anything's capitalized funky, it won't work. But I could hit OK, jump back into that sketch, and now that it's favored, it will autocomplete. So I could say hole diameter dash ref, and I could even make equations. So I could say times 2. And you'll see that 18 times 2 equals 36. And we quickly created that reference. So I could say stop sketch. Extrude these real quick. And so that's cool, but you might be asking me, why did I do that if I could have just created parameters in this one window? Well, the cool thing here is I can also jump back to that parameter. Say I want to create another derived, add to another existing, and let's say make sure I get the parameters and say favorites, hit OK. And this time I'm going to add to a different file. Let me find it. As you can see, Aaron's been playing in my file, it looks like. I think it's this guy. And it opened it up. It added that derived feature. And again, I can go through and edit a sketch. Let's say it's that. Yeah, let me find the right sketch, that guy. And I'm going to add that dimension one more time. So just remember, if this time I didn't favorite it, like through my workflow, you can actually just make sure you type in hole diameter ref, and it comes over. So now I have a master. Let me make this change. Extrude. Now I have a master file that controls my parameters in 2 different Fusion 360 designs. So previously we couldn't have been able to have one. If I had to go through and change maybe the hole diameter, I want them to be the same in both Fusion 360 designs, I would have had to jump in and change them manually. And of course, you never know, maybe I made a change to it, and Aaron needed to also make that change but wasn't aware. Here, I can now just jump back in, say I want to change that parameter. Let's change that to 15, hit OK. Save it, updated hole D to 15, hit OK. And when I jump back into these files, I automatically get the out of late reference from both the in the timeline as well up here, and it flags over here. So let's just grab that get latest. You'll see if we watch closely, these hole diameters update a little bit. And I broke something, but let's check the diameter here. And of course it did not work there. Let's update. That one worked. I must have screwed up. So that one went down to 15 for the radius because I multiplied it by 2, which means the diameter. So it must have done something wrong with the other one. I'll look into it and get back to you if anyone saw what I did wrong, and make sure to comment in the comments and tell me what I did wrong. But that's some of the workflows with Derive. There's so many workflows I've found with Derive. I think I'm going to be using it more and more rather than using the external references from the data panel and inserting it. The main reason is you could select be selective about what you pick out of that Fusion 360 design, as well as you can make changes downstream in the referenced file. So if I needed to maybe have one plate in a couple different assemblies that had different hole locations, I would bring that one plate in as a derived feature, add those hole locations, and then use that in different places. The other way is for manufacturing. If you're doing CAM toolpaths of a couple different parts in a Fusion 360 design, take each one out into its own derived, put the vise in, use it that way. I would love to hear if you find any other cool workflows for the Derived feature. I've found so many so far, and I've only been playing with it a couple weeks. I'm a huge fan. But that's it for this week. Aaron's going to be back next week talking about some other new topics. Have a great week, guys. Make sure to subscribe if you like this and leave some comments on how we're doing and if you want what topics you want to hear next.